Good morning and good afternoon, depending on where you are based. Welcome to this very special event of the Geneva Association, an event titled Women Intrapreneurs in Insurance, Stories of a Shifting Paradigm. I am Jad Ariss, Managing Director of the Geneva Association, and it's a great pleasure for me to welcome you, participants, to this session, and of course, our three high-profile panelists. Why is this a special event? Because it goes with a new special initiative of the Geneva Association this year, 2020, the Geneva Association Women in Insurance Award. Some of you may be aware that we are a membership organization of global insurance and reinsurance CEOs, and it is an increasing priority for our members and their companies to address the agenda of diversity and inclusion in general and gender parity in particular in their HR practices, in their cultures, and in their businesses overall. With our award, we want to demonstrate that the issue of gender parity is very important to the insurance industry. And as a matter of fact, there is a long way to go. The Geneva Association, for example, has 75 members who are CEOs of insurance and reinsurance companies worldwide. And out of the 75 CEOs, only 5 are women. Yes, that number has increased, has been actually multiplied by 2.5 over the past 2 years, but still there is a long way to go. And so by celebrating our outstanding women leaders today, we want to motivate and inspire the next generation of women in insurance to persevere in an industry which until now has been, frankly, male-dominated in its leadership. It is now time for me to introduce to you our panelists. Our first panelist is actually the first winner of the Women in Insurance Award, Garance Wattez-Richard, CEO of AXA Emerging Customers. Garance was chosen by the selection committee of the award for her work to tackle the insurance protection gap in emerging markets and protect underserved population. This is a business unit which Garance founded in 2016, AXA Emerging Customers, and it now distributes insurance to close to 20 million customers across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. I would like also to thank Garance for suggesting the theme of intrapreneurship for our discussion today, and so that we can explore opportunities for women in insurance through that lens. Our second panelist, Carla Smith, is Senior Vice President of Specialty Solutions Canada, an important segment of commercial lines at Intact Financial Corporation, Canada's largest P&C insurance company. Carla's career at Intact has spent more than 20 years, and we look forward to hearing how intrapreneurship has factored into her experience working in insurance. Carla has also cooperated closely with the Geneva Association for a number of years, and she provided important input and encouragement to us in launching the Women in Insurance Award. Thank you, Carla, for that. Finally, we are incredibly honored to have with us Inga Beale. I think Inga barely needs any introduction. Right now, she is the chair of Mediclinic International, and previously she was the CEO of Lloyd's of London and the CEO of Converium, among other leadership roles in the industry. Inga was a member of the selection committee that selected Garance for our 2020 award, and she has graciously agreed not only to participate to this webinar, but also to sit on the selection committee for our 2021 award. I take this opportunity to let all our audience know that we are actually launching today, just after this webinar, the 2020 award, and the nomination process is open. You can find it easily on our website. www.genevaassociation.org. Before we proceed with the discussion itself, I would like to just give you a few precisions on the modalities of this event. After a discussion with our three panelists, we will open the floor for a Q&A session to give you, participants to the webinar, the opportunity to speak directly to our panelists. So you will be able to ask questions, and you can do this in two possible ways. Either verbally, the method we prefer for a lively exchange, and for this, the only thing to do is to click the raise hand button in the control panel on your screen. This way we can unmute you and you can speak to the presenters and ask your question. The other option is to type your question in the chat box. I will see it on the screen and I will read it out loud for you. I suggest now we move to our discussion, and my first question will be for Garance. Garance, as the CEO of AXA Emerging Customers, you are in a senior business role in one of the largest insurance groups in the world, and you were previously AXA's group head of external communications. So you moved from a support function role to a business role. Can you tell us about this transformation, Garance, and how intrapreneurship may have played a role in this transformation?
Thank you, Jad. That wasn't at all the question you said you were going to ask. No, I'm joking. Thank you very much. And I have to say it's a real honor to be here with Inga and Carla and yourself. And I'd like to again thank the Geneva Association, because I have to say it came as a surprise. And I really mean that. And since then, it's opened a lot of doors for me, but in particular with regards to the, let's say, younger women who contact me. I've met very interesting and exciting profiles and people who've come with new ideas within the industry, and actually people from without the industry who have contacted me. And so this has opened the door for me to meet great people and to get the Geneva Association known also. People have even asked me how they could set up this kind of association within their sub-segments of other industries, but I can always tell you about that. So thank you very much for this award. With regards to this jump from what's commonly called indeed a support function to business, and even more a support function that isn't technical, because you have support functions that are finance, etc., and they're especially in the insurance industry, and maybe even more especially, even though that's not very English, but you know, English supports innovation, in AXA, where the the Graal is to be good at finance. The Graal is to be in the finance team, and if you're a good, if you're an expert in finance, then you're the person, right? So it's coming from communication. I was thinking about it this morning, and I think that there are probably five things that helped me a lot. I think one, it's that it's in the DNA of AXA to trust people to be mobile. And that can sound quite basic, but I haven't seen that in all companies, in several others, but it's true that AXA does have this let me take a risk on you kind of approach, and I'm sure you'll confirm. The second is, and this isn't necessary, but it helped me a lot, it's to have a network. It's to have a network, a very large network of people who know you and trust you, and actually who you can turn to, because you're starting something new, right? If you're doing something entrepreneurial, you have an entrepreneur's spirit, but not enough to actually go and do it on your own. You still kind of need the four walls of a big organization. And so in your personality, you were going to turn to people for whom this is not an objective, for whom this is not on their target letter or their strat plan. And they're probably in the beginning going to do it for you out of the kindness of their professional heart, and because you've done things for them before, or they like you, you've developed a relationship. So network is very important, as is obviously management support. And when I say management, it's the CEO. If you don't have the backing initially from the CEO, it's really very difficult to open those doors. even though using that too much doesn't work either at all, because you have to kind of find a balance between that and sort of name dropping and a lot of humility. Because you go and see your entities, you're trying something new, and basically you're saying to them, I have an idea that you didn't think of. And as a lot of companies, we have the not homegrown syndrome. So obviously in the beginning, they're going to say, yeah, but we know our market better than you. So you're very sweet. Thanks to your network and the fact they like you, that they don't shut the door in your face immediately, but you know, it comes quite close to that. So it's management support and a certain dose of humility. Then I think the fourth idea I had really, which doesn't necessarily put me in a great light, but I think it's very honest, is that you have to have a certain degree of candor. And that's a nice way of putting it. I can almost say naive. I don't know, I mean, I think I would answer yes, but to what extent I would jump like I did if I knew every single bottleneck and barrier and complication and problem that I would be faced with. And I think I didn't know what I was going to be faced with. I remember sitting down. You know, I went through the process as if it were I was an external candidate, and literally I sat down at my table once they said yes, and I thought to myself, I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know how much, if I'm supposed to ask for a budget, am I not? As you say, a support function. You know, everything is already in place. So it's really about having a form of not knowing 100% where you're going, I think. And this leads me to my fifth one, which is, I think the most important one still, is that even if you don't know where you're going, even if it's not something you've done before, and of course that begs the infamous debate of are women recruited on experience and men on potential, right? But that's not a debate I'm going to go into now. You know, you still need to have a bridge. You still need to prove that you're going to hit the ground running, and it's not going to take you 10 years to build value, and there's still something different you're bringing, right? But that doesn't have to be having done exactly the same job in a smaller company or with a smaller team or with a smaller geographical scope. It can be something completely different. It can be having a conviction. It can be having a personal experience, something you went through with your parents, something you were educated about, a personal interest. In my case, I was a UN child with both my parents at the UN, so I traveled a lot. And I mean, inclusion when you're a UN child is like, you know, you jump in the inclusion cauldron like Obelix, I guess, in the magic potion, and then, you know, you can never get rid of it. So that's what I brought. That was different, but it was a bridge. So I could count on something, at least one foot to stand on, to then be able to create my other leg. So yeah, I would say those are the main factors today. Fundamentally, to conclude, it's really about not creating your own blockers. Women, but men, of course, maybe they don't express it in the same way, but everyone is going to say, I can't do this, I can't do this, and this, and this, and this. Just don't create your own. And what's the worst thing that can happen to you? I think the worst thing is not that bad.
Thank you very much, Garance, for sharing this with us and these 5 elements. I'm sure our audience will have found it useful. Let me now move to Inga. Inga, you've achieved great prominence as an industry leader, as a CEO of Lloyd's, actually the first ever woman CEO of Lloyd's, but also as CEO of Converium, Global Chief Underwriting Officer of Zurich Insurance. Frankly, has being a woman made your professional advancement more difficult, less difficult, or hasn't it been a notable factor? What can you tell us on this, Inga?
It's been a huge factor, sometimes in a way the negative, and I feel as though I've been climbing a mountain my entire career and hitting lots of glass ceilings, and some of them I created myself. So it's been a very rewarding career in insurance, but it has been extremely challenging. And I, of course, started work perhaps before some people who are on this call were even born. I started in London in 1982. Very few senior females in insurance in those days, no real role models for me to look up to at all. I didn't join the Lloyd's market. I was in the company market, but we operated in a very similar fashion to Lloyd's in that we were open plan environment with brokers walking in to the office completely unannounced and having a meeting with us at our desk. So very much as people walk into the Lloyd's underwriting room today, albeit under different non-COVID situations. That was my start into the insurance sector. And in this open plan environment with these 35 underwriters receiving brokers, I was the only female. So that was how I started. And I wanted to desperately fit in and belong and be one of the boys, because I didn't feel there was any advantage whatsoever being a female. In fact, I do remember, and I really hope things have changed, but I remember I was a reinsurance underwriter and we were leading one of the placements, or one of the lead underwriters on a reinsurance of a Sudanese insurance company. And I remember we were visited by somebody from the Sudanese company, a man, and perhaps he didn't know what my name was, whether I was female or male. He knew my name was Inga, but it's a Norwegian name or Scandinavian, sometimes German name. So perhaps he didn't realize that I was a woman. And when he was introduced to me, he refused to see me because he saw I was a female, and he said he wasn't going to have a meeting with a female. This was in the 80s, remember. I really hope things changed, but that was very difficult for me because I was an aspiring underwriter. I was just assisting then, and I thought, gosh, perhaps people are not going to want to even visit with me or have a meeting with me because I'm a woman. And that was how sort of tough it was in those days. And then a very sexist thing happened. I won't go into the details now, but a very sexist incident happened, and I'd been working about 8 years, and I decided that I would never work in insurance again. I came in one morning and decided that was it, and I walked out of the office, packed my bag, and went off around the world for a year, thinking I can never work in such a chauvinistic industry in my life. I can't bear it anymore. And so insurance very nearly lost me forever. Now, what happened, I had an amazing trip around the world. I met amazing people, and I was inspired by a woman I met actually in Sydney, Australia, nothing to do with insurance, but she inspired me to go back to London and take on the world, and women can do anything they want. So when I did get back in 1991, I was actually offered my old job back. I started my insurance career again. And fortunately, within a year, I actually got a new job, and I ended up working for a US company that had very strong proactive talent management. And I don't believe if I hadn't been working for them, I would have reached anywhere near the heights that I did in insurance, because I was in a very male environment still, but this company insisted on their managers promoting women and people of ethnic minorities. Now, for a US company, a definition of an ethnic minority is very different to what it might be in parts of Europe or other parts of the world, in Africa or Asia. But in the US, they had a very distinct definition, and managers had to promote women and people from ethnic minorities. And I was one of those targets for my manager to promote as a female. So one day I was offered promotion, and I actually said no because I didn't think I was good enough. But because his bonus was going to be affected, he got the machine to support him, and people came from the US to visit me in London, and I had a senior female mentor come and speak to me, and they encouraged me and gave me the confidence to say yes to that promotion. So that was sort of my own glass ceiling that I nearly put above myself by saying no to that very, very first promotion. And I'm so pleased, Jad, that I heard that there are 5 female CEOs as members of the Geneva Association now, because this may be my last story, how in a way women sometimes we have to keep our mouths shut about things, and sometimes we have to fight and protest and make a noise. I remember, and I'm sure Nicholas von Bomhard won't mind me telling this story now, but I do remember when I was on the Geneva Association, I was the only female CEO at that time, and this was when I was CEO of Converium, way before the Lloyd's role. And we had our annual meeting in Munich. So Nicholas von Bomhard, who was the chair of the Geneva Association at that time, and he was hosting this event in Munich. We usually start off with a wonderful dinner. And he stood up and gave this speech, and he welcomed everybody. And generally, the CEOs take their other halves, their partners. I was actually on my own, but he welcomed everyone, and he said, at the end of the evening, he said, welcomed everyone, had the dinner, then said thank you. And he said, we'll see all the men tomorrow at the session starting at 9. And we wish all the women a wonderful day enjoying the shops of Munich. And I sat there completely shocked by his comment. And part of me was filled with rage, and I thought, I've got to go and complain and whatever. I actually decided to stay calm at that moment. But I'm so pleased that now there are 5 women, so that if anyone makes a faux pas like that again, there will be a few voices to lean on. Actually, I always also remember with fond memories that evening, because Henri de Castries, who was still the CEO of AXA, he came up to me and he said, Inga, it's so lovely to have one female CEO, and I hope in the future we can have more. So Garance, well done for making it in AXA. I know that there's a great environment, and I'm hoping that the insurance sector will look completely different when I'm way gone and beyond the insurance world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Inga, for sharing these personal memories. They are deeply moving, actually, and I am, and I'm sure all the participants are very grateful for this. Thank you for sharing. Carla, you've been with Intact, Canada's largest P&C insurer, for more than 20 years. And you've occupied a range of leadership roles, both at regional levels and at national or even global levels. Do you see yourself as an intrapreneur in a large organization like Intact? And if so, what does it mean to you?
Sure. So first I have to say, Jad, I know I was invited to this to be a panelist, but so far, listening to Inga and Garence, I very much feel like I'm in the audience as well. It's been fantastic hearing their stories. I can't wait until I get to hear more later in the panel. So speaking of the question that you asked me, I have to confess that I actually Googled the word intrapreneur when I was first invited to join the panel. Because if I was going to answer your question about whether I feel that I am one, I wanted to make sure I had the right definition. And so once I digested a few online definitions, I can say my conclusion was that, in fact, I think I am sort of an entrepreneur within Intact. And I would say that I think the core principle of being an intrapreneur is making innovation and change within a large corporation. And I can honestly say, when I reflect, that I think this has been most days of my life throughout my entire career. And it's been quite a privilege, actually, especially for the last decade. I have been very lucky to be in roles where I was building, acquiring, and integrating businesses by leveraging 2 things, I would say: my academic knowledge of business and insurance, but also in intrapreneurship. I was leveraging the informal Intact knowledge that I've accumulated over the 21 years that I've worked for Intact. And I would put, my network at Intact in that category as well. And I found it to be extremely rewarding to be able to leverage sort of both of those things. I'll confess, though, that how I've expressed my intrapreneurship, I think, has changed a lot over the last 20 years. During the earlier years of my career, I was more preoccupied, I think, with learning and performing, which translated into me solving, I'd say, smaller everyday problems for myself and for my colleagues. And at the time, it required, a lot of energy and drive to make those changes, because my voice within the organization was still quite small at the time. And as time passed and I was taking on larger problems, having the opportunity to act on larger opportunities, it required a different skill set to be successful. And I think one of the best things that I did at that time was to study project management, in fact. At the time, the discipline of project management was mostly reserved for industries like IT and construction, but I was drawn to it because to me, it seemed to profess the formula for making successful change. And I have to say, it was one of the most useful things that I have ever studied. I really think that knowing about formal project management has enhanced my entrepreneurial success over the years, my batting average, I guess, in trying to innovate and make change. And I guess finally, I would say that once I did some formal studies in strategy, maybe the other end of the spectrum from project management, I felt like I finally understood the whole picture. So having a structured view of how strategy is made gave me the confidence to dream a bit bigger than I had before, which of course creates the potential for even bigger innovation and change to be made. And so I guess to summarize, to me, what entrepreneurship means is first having the desire and the drive to make things better and to tackle problems and opportunities no matter how big or small. And then second, having the skills to actually make the change happen. It can be very messy. And I, as I've said, personally found that project management can be very helpful as a navigation tool. And last, being able to actually see the most important opportunities and threats so as to build responses to those things. I found the principles of strategy to be very helpful in opening my eyes to opportunities and threats that my natural instincts may not have led me to see. So that's what I'll say, Jad.
Thank you very much, Carla. So each one of you has shared her personal experience. I'd like us to look more into the future and to see what more can be done towards gender parity in the insurance industry. And it is likely that part of it is in the hands of the organizations and part of it is in the hands of women themselves. So I'll first turn to you, Garance. Earlier this year, when you were announced as the winner of the Women in Insurance Award, we asked for your advice to women working in the insurance industry. And one of your key messages was, be proactive. Can you please elaborate on that and tell us what you mean by this?
Thank you, especially since I think it's something that can mean something very different depending on the person. So I would say for introverts, I can only guess, as you can see, but it probably is just about speaking up. For extroverts, it can be about not speaking all the time and choosing the right moment. But I think fundamentally, I think today is my 5-day. It means 5 things. Again, thinking about it this morning, I think what I had mentioned in my video at the time that makes people laugh, but I think it's very true. It's about not always waiting for permission, and not only waiting for it, but not asking for it. And I have to say, ever since I've said that to my team, they spend their days not asking me for anything. And I always say, you know, don't ask for permission, just ask for forgiveness. And so they spend their life coming to my office and saying, oh, I'm sorry. But there is an element of truth that we, you know, please proactively. If you wait for people to say go ahead, then you can wait for a long time. The second one is I realized that it's something that I did and a lot of people do, but I actually put a word on it for the first time quite recently when I was reading a bedtime story to one of my girls. I have three small girls, and it was a Greek myth, and it was about Kairos, you know, the other notion of time for the Greeks. And it's about, and Kairos, I don't know, many people must know this, but I didn't know it when I was reading it. Kairos is a little Greek god. He's very small, but he has very long hair. It makes me laugh when I look at Inga and I say that, but he has very, 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 very long hair, and he's constantly turning around the earth. And seizing the day is seizing Kairos, because he turns and turns, and at one point you take your hand out and you grab him. And it's really about seizing that opportunity. I know it sounds corny or, you know, over labored, but I really think proactivity is about that. It's about, and if you take it one step down, which is my third point, it's about listening, and it's also about not listening. I think it's listening to sometimes weak signals, but not always listening to everyone on what they can tell you that they think you can do and what you can't do. And I'm not saying it comes from a bad place, but in French we call it la bienveillance limitante. Is that people will say, oh, but you probably want a third kid, and your husband has this great job in Paris, and so you can't move, and you know your last one is too young, and your parents are old, and you know, I know it comes from a good place, but at one point maybe stop listening to them and listen more to you. The fourth one is very much about knowing your weaknesses, and I find this, having had an education both in Anglophone and Francophone or Latin cultures, I think what the Anglophones get very right, amongst many other things, is about not necessarily finding the need to be good at everything. And I find the Latins have a tendency of wanting to be very complete. And so whenever they identify a weakness, they try to become good at it, but you'll never be as good as the person who's very strong at one of your weaknesses. You just won't. You just have to make sure you surround yourself by people and proactively admit your weaknesses. You don't have to call them weaknesses, you can call them points of development, but fundamentally they're things you're not as good at. And surround yourself with people who are good at those things. And I remember I found myself, and I've told this story before, 1.5 years ago, I actually went to the Fnac, this retail store, and I bought Actuarial Skills 101. And so I started reading it over the weekend, and I thought, you know, what am I doing? I'm never going to be as good as the actuary. But I felt this frustration of not always understanding what they were saying. But I think we have to just proactively admit that we're not going to be good at everything, and that's okay. And finally, I think, and this may it's funny because I was reading an article actually this morning by the CEO of Solvay, who's a Franco-Moroccan woman. And I think it's because this week is, as we were saying before, you know, Women's Week, so to speak. There's the Women's Forum. And so she was being asked, you know, how she got there and what was her career path, etc. And at one point she said, so her name is, hold on, Ilham Kadri. Sorry, I'm very bad with names. And she said in her article something that I found quite interesting. She said, each woman leader is an anecdote. And of course, a good anecdote, but we can agree or disagree with that. But I think it's because she's saying this because she's found that in every profile of every woman she has in mind, there's something very particular. There's something that really happened in their life that made them. Inga met someone in Sydney who really changed her mind on things. And I've also made quite a few meetings that led me to where I am today, but we're all an anecdote. So I think we have to go for being less of an anecdote. And to me, one of the paths to get there is proactivity. And probably the last one I would say is that it's about knowing what makes you happy. If you're not happy, don't keep going for those goals that you think you set yourself out for. And when you were 18 and your parents said what would be great is if you could be a doctor, a lawyer, an insurer, real estate, I don't know what, if that doesn't make you happy, then I'm sure if Inga hadn't found this person in Sydney, she would be doing something else that makes her very happy also. So there isn't just one single path.
Thank you, Garance, for sharing. Let me turn to Carla. Carla, individual initiative is, yes, one way to address gender imbalance in insurance and in insurance leadership. And of course, the company's initiatives or the organization's initiatives is another way. What is your view on this? How much is in the hands of women and how much is in the hands of their companies or their company's management?
Can you hear me, Jad?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Hello?
Okay.
Hello?
Very good. I think
Yes.
the internet connection is becoming a little bit weak. So, is it all right now?
It is all right.
Okay, I'll do my best. So, thank you for your question. So, I think my answer would be that I see the responsibility actually as being equal between women leaders themselves and the companies that they work for. But I will also say that I think progress can happen much faster when senior management at a company embraces the notion of finding greater gender or diversity balance. Now, I'll speak about my Intact experience. I'm obviously biased, having been at Intact for so long, but I can say that I do very, very much appreciate the way that Intact has approached it, which has been to focus on changing our working environment so as to make it attractive to the broadest possible talent pool. Now, I think importantly, this approach acknowledges that the environment likely has to change more than the candidates themselves do, whether those candidates are women or other diverse groups. Now, in parallel, Intact has also been clear that we are and will always be a meritocracy. So the most talented person for the job will always be chosen for the role, regardless of our own diversity goals. And as a woman, I can say that I do appreciate this, because I want all of my colleagues to feel that I've truly earned any positions that I receive on the basis of my performance and not my diversity profile. And so with all of this said, I think I'm sort of making it sound like more of the responsibility lies with the company. But I think in the end, and Garance has sort of been alluding to this, and of course Inga's given many examples of her own today, women need to be courageous and put their hand up for positions that they want. You know, even the most ideal environment, even the perfect environment, won't create change unless women reach out and grab the opportunities that are before us. And this is why I say, I think that the responsibility is equal and shared. Even in a less conducive environment, courageous women can succeed. I've really loved hearing Inga's stories about that. But even in a very conducive environment, not all talented women will naturally put their hand up. And so in both situations, some progress will be made, but the progress will be much greater if both the environment is conducive and women and other diverse profiles are actively in pursuit of those opportunities. So it's a bit of a mixed answer, Jad, but those are my thoughts, I think.
Thank you very much, Carla. Before I move on to the next question for Inga, I would like to turn to the audience and ask the people who are listening or watching the webinar not to hesitate to ask questions. So you have the ability, again, either to ask questions with the chat function or simply to raise your hand on the panel, and I will see it and I will be able to give the floor to you. But before we do this, Inga, I want to ask you, what was your experience as a CEO, both at Converium and at Lloyd's, in trying to promote gender parity? And based on that, what advice would you give to other CEOs in the insurance industry, to Geneva Association members? You highlighted that you were a Geneva Association member, even a board member for a number of years. And let me maybe more precise in my questions. From the outside, people tend to think that CEOs have free reins to implement whatever changes they feel are needed within the organizations. And from the outside, we always tend to underestimate the internal constraints, the internal barriers that may exist in promoting whatever agenda, but specifically a gender parity agenda. What can you share with us about this?
Well, my inclination is to say to those CEOs, just do it. You know, the Nike slogan that they coined years ago, just do it, because you can. But of course, Chad, you are right. There are other things that limit to a certain extent what you can do. But if you're a CEO and you mean it, and you really, really mean it, because everybody can see through a CEO that doesn't really mean it these days, the amount of communication that's done on a more ad hoc basis or less formal with social media and things. CEOs are communicating a lot. And if you don't really, really mean it, in other words, if you don't care about it and don't actually want to make a difference, people will see through it. So first of all, as a CEO, really, really mean it, and then go and just do it. Now, I can remember, particularly at Lloyd's, when there was a bit of noise around me being the first female CEO there, and I had quite a lot of, I had a lot of lovely support messages. I had an equal number of rather nasty negative criticisms. You do, as a CEO, have many business priorities to balance. And so you've always got to think about how much am I pushing this one today or this week, how much am I pushing that one, and all the time, because you're juggling all the things. But, and I did actually struggle a little bit with my board, because usually, you know, the CEO might have these lovely ambitions to do X, and then you hit your board and you've got to explain to them, this is what you want to do, and this has got to be the priority for this month or this year or this week. And you can do it, but I mean, I did have some challenges at Lloyd's, for instance, in getting the board to totally agree that we would have a strong focus on diversity and inclusion. It didn't come initially. I had to work hard on that. First of all, many people who haven't studied the benefits of having diverse teams need to be convinced of the business case. I've been spouting on about this for so long. I think everybody surely understands the benefits. Even, you know, all the big consulting firms have released data to defend and support why you need diverse teams and why women should be at the table just as much as men. But there are many people who haven't been as engaged. So first of all, you do have to convince your own internal stakeholders that this is important. I think less so now, and also less so the external stakeholders, because there's been such a focus recently on equality, whether it's the you know, on the racial side or whether it's gender. There's such a lot of noise from the external environment now that actually no CEO has an excuse not to be able to use that as a reason to make change happen. But you've got the cultural challenges, the establishment that you've got, you know, the established culture that you've got to break down. So you've got lots of perhaps mediocre people sitting in roles just because they happen to be men. And Carla, you know, I could talk all day about don't want to just tick the box. Well, remember, men had 100% quota in Lloyd's for 300 years. So how did they didn't worry about it, and it was 100%. So I wouldn't worry about ever being part of something that's just trying to get equality, because there are so many other things around that you have to break down and knock out of the way to get even the same amount of opportunity. So there are many other factors that come into this, but we probably don't have time to talk about those today. But there is a challenge within an established culture to get everyone to buy in, all the hiring managers, all the people who are under threat because somebody better might not have been noticed before because of the color of their skin or their gender, but now I've got to get them noticed by the company and things like that. So there's lots of internal things that you have to overcome as a CEO. Also you've got to get that pipeline, you've got to get the mechanisms in place to get the talent in, to importantly retain it, because the biggest issue now, and we're discovering the more research we're doing into females and their lack of representation in really influential roles, is all the microaggression and all the little behavioral things and comments that go on, not only in the workplace, in society at large, that somehow manage to keep women down or off to the side in some way. It's very, very complex. So a CEO cannot just do that and expect the whole organization to move and embrace it. You've got a lot of things to do, but first of all, really, really mean it and communicate that you mean it, and then at least you can start doing something about it.
Thank you very much, Inga. I think we could go on for a long time on this, but I think it's fair to move to the Q&A session. We have actually a first hand raised here by a lady called Sabine Denet. So Sabine, I will unmute you. Make sure you're unmuted on your side, and please ask your question, and hopefully this works. Can you please unmute yourself, Sabine?
Do you hear me?
Yes, we do, Sabine. Can you please let us know which organization you're part of, and then ask your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jad. I'm Sabine Denet. I'm from Geneva, and I'm running marketing and communications there. So not unlike Garence's former job. And so I have a question for Garance. Actually, twofold question. First of all, probably take some audacity to make that move, as you said, from a service segment to reach out. Can you not hear me?
We can hear you. We can
because
hear you.
I see Garance, she looks like she can't.
I missed just a small piece, sorry.
Okay, sorry for that. So I start again. I have a twofold question. First of all, to be able to apply for that position, and it takes quite a bit of audacity, obviously, from a service unit to business segment. You first of all have to know about that position being available. So obviously, AXA is advertising that type of high-level C-suite positions internally and externally, I guess, because somehow you have to understand there is an open position in the first place. And then secondly, did that idea really grow basically within yourself? Like, that's something I really want to do, I go for it? Or did maybe someone else say, well, Garance, would that be something for you? Why don't you go and apply for it? If that's too personal, don't respond. But I feel like this is really an important thing. Is it already part of the culture that you feel like I can go for that, or some people may need a little push? That would be interesting for me.
Thank you. I think those are two great questions, and every case is going to be different. In my case, it wasn't something that was really advertised for yet, and I think it's back to the point about networking, in the sense that I had started hearing through the grapevine that management was starting to think that the low-income mass market segments were not being addressed by AXA, and that we were all fighting for the top 5–10% of any pyramid in the world, and maybe we should stop fighting for a saturated triangle and go for the level underneath. And so I had started hearing that, and I think the moment of truth was when several people said, oh, I heard in this management committee, or I heard in this side meeting that they were starting to look for people and they had hired a headhunter. I thought my only way to be part of that, because nobody will think of me coming from communications, that's for sure, is to go and speak to the CEO or the deputy CEO and put my hand up. And so no, nobody suggested it to me, but here again, it's to my point of the bridge, is that you have to feel that there's something in there that really talks to you, that echoes inside of you. So it's easy when I guess you talk about inclusion, but because it's very linked to the heart and the creation of social value. So there's a very across the board emotional element to it. But that's true for anything that you want to do. If you want to work on cyber risk, if you want to be the blockchain expert and create an expertise on blockchain or artificial intelligence or whatever it is. And so I remember very clearly, and I think this is going to answer your question in just one anecdote. So I asked my assistant, and I said to her, can you please check with the assistant of the deputy CEO whether he has a moment for me? And I thought it'd give me a bit of time to think, and then I'll go and make my case and make my pitch. And she got back to me and she said, well, he has half an hour this afternoon, in an hour, or in 4 months. And so I thought, oh my God, this afternoon, I'm not ready. I don't know what I'm going to say. And in 4 months is too late, because it will have been done. It will have been chosen. So I went that afternoon completely unprepared. And for those who know who the deputy CEO was at the time, it was never really a very good idea to go unprepared. And I can sense a smile coming on Jad's face. So I went unprepared, and maybe that's what worked for me. Back to my point about candid. I think there's something in you that will make you go and grab it. And usually, and I think that's why your question is interesting, it's probably not something that has been completely formalized or structured as a job being advertised. What I suggested to this person at the time was not the way he thought about it, because it hadn't yet been put in a job description. And I think that's where Carla's point on intrapreneurship comes in. It's not really something that's been thought through really yet, because if it has reached that stage of maturity, it's no longer creating a market or creating a business. It's kind of already there. So it's your weak signals that you're hearing, more or less weak. And in your position, I'm sure you hear them a lot. And it's deciding that if you make a proposal and you show the bridge, and you're maybe not fully informed, then you can convince people in front of you, and they'll make the leap with you.
Well, thank you so much. That was super interesting and very honest. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for your question.
Thank you. Thank you, Sabine, for asking these questions. I am going through my list here, and I see a question from Rachel Very. So Rachel, let me unmute you and let's check whether we can hear you. Rachel?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Rachel. Go ahead, please ask your question.
Yes, starting off, thank you for the inspiring stories. They're incredibly interesting to hear, and again, very inspiring. My question would be to all three of you, actually. It sounds like you've faced some similar parts in your career. How would you balance staying in a culture that maybe has potential to be more inclusive, but you're still fighting that uphill battle and you want to be part of that solution, versus maybe leaving that culture and finding a place where you can be more authentic and maybe have a more immediate impact on what the business is trying to do?
Thank you, Rachel, for this very good question. So who would like to give a shot at it?
Well, I don't mind just kicking off. And it's not so much the inclusion piece, it's a culture in general if you're not feeling that it's the right one for you, but you want to be a change agent. Because I did actually work somewhere where I was hired in specifically because I was a bit of a change agent and I would challenge the way things were done. But I started to get very frustrated because there weren't enough of us. And so it felt to me as though the company wasn't really behind it, even though the CEO had hired me. It was his personal vision, but it hadn't been shared more broadly. And I must admit, after I think I stuck it for 2 years before inside, I thought, no, I can't stay here any longer. I'm drained of energy because I can't fight this on my own. But I think if you see real signs that other people are being around you and you're getting a bit of a movement going, then I would definitely stick it out and it'd be worth it. But your gut should actually tell you, I think, eventually that enough is enough and you should not stay there.
Thank you, Inga. Carla or Garance, do you want to add to this? Carla.
Sure. I really like the way that Inga has put it. I have had, recognizing my experience has been 2 decades, just over 2 decades at Intact. And so I've clearly, taken the choice to stay. But there have been different experiences, subcultures of different departments. I think, though, what makes the difference is when you have the feeling that there is a possibility for change, even when, in a moment where it feels like it's difficult. Change is not, rarely in fact, is change easy. But I think you need to feel that sense, whether it's coming from your CEO, whether it comes from a particular colleague. I think the ability to persevere requires that there be some sense of the possibility before you. And I think if ever I too were to have lost the feeling of that possibility, it could have turned out differently. But I'm very happy to say, I mean, obviously I've been at Intact for 20 years, and it's because I've always felt a strong sense of that possibility, even when I felt I needed to be a bit more vocal about a particular change.
Thank you, Carla, and thank you, Rachel, for having asked this question. I see a hand raised by Céline Samin. Céline, please unmute yourself. Can you hear us?
Yes, I am hearing you, Jad. Thank you very much.
And we can hear you too, Céline, so please ask your question.
Then I am Céline Samin. I'm working in AXA, and I cross Garance and Jad in this experience. My question will be, we have taken a step forward on the women inclusion in senior positions slowly. Do you think COVID crisis and our accrued scrutiny on recruitment and promotion would put us back in a way? And if yes, what we can do to fight against that?
Thank you, Céline. Who wants to give a shot at this? Is COVID-19 going to slower the pace of women to executive management positions?
I have 2 views on this, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing what Garance and Inga have to say. I've seen 2 things happen through the pandemic. there's been a move towards many more meetings and forums like this. And I actually think it's been a bit of an equalizer because I think it removes the notion of where you sit at the table, which for some people there tends to be a bias, you know, to sit in a faraway place or not. And I think it neutralizes those choices, and truly every square on the screen becomes equal and everybody's voice becomes equal. And I think I have witnessed sort of an equalizing of participation, regardless of gender, regardless of other diversity factors, because of that. On the other hand, I think the pressures of childcare during a pandemic, I have witnessed different experiences between different cohorts of my own employees because of that. Now, I think, you know, that hopefully that is a temporary situation. And I know many organizations are doing everything they can to also kind of, to a certain degree, support and equalize the effects there. But I think what has been triggered by that, hopefully for the future, is a desire to be flexible. We've proven in many organizations that work can be done from home, and the ability to flex schedules and have different working arrangements, I think, can also in the future, as companies adjust, be somewhat of an equalizer. Those are my observations.
Thank you very much, Carla. Inga or Garance, do you want to add anything to this?
I just wanted to add, I think it's great. When over my career, I remember particularly when I was in my 40s, late 40s, a lot of women who were a similar age to me decided to leave the corporate world behind because of the time commitment, the travel commitment or whatever. And they said, I just don't want to do it. And so we had a real increase in female entrepreneurs. So they started up their own businesses because they could control their lives much more. And I think that, to Carla's point, COVID-19 has actually opened up a lot more opportunities for women to stay in the corporate world because it's giving them that flexibility. And in that way, that's a great thing. But of course, we've got to realize that women overall throughout this around the world are much worse off in general than men. It's impacting more women. More women are going to be losing their jobs eventually. But in our insurance sector, for the senior women, I think it could be very, very beneficial, this new flexible approach.
Thank you very much, Inga. This session is drawing to an end. It's 2 minutes before 5, sorry, CET. I would like to thank warmly Garance, Carla, and Inga for having participated into this. And as I have the privilege of seeing the names of the people in the audience, I think it's fair to say that we have a majority of women. We do have men, but we have a majority of women. And so I want to emphasize again today that we are opening, as of now, the applications for our 2021 Women in Insurance Award. And to present this, we have a small movie. So we are going to end this session watching this movie. Thank you very much to our panel speakers, and thank you very much to the whole audience. We can go with the video, Peter, please.